Hey guys, if you like my videos, please like and subscribe to my channel. I would really appreciate it, thanks. And also let me know where y'all are watching from and at what time. I'm curious. I'd always joked that diving off the coast of Salem, Massachusetts would eventually get me burned at the stake, or at least earn me a permanent spot on some spooky YouTube channel. But I never imagined it would land me in the mess it did. Back then, though, I was still cocky enough to chase a centuries-old Spanish galleon rumored to rest beneath the murky Atlantic, loaded down with gold. Treasure fever makes a man reckless, take it from me. That day started bad and got worse. 30 feet down, my regulator sputtered, a sound you never want to hear underwater, and my oxygen gauge flickered like a busted neon sign. Panic surged through my chest, a suffocating feeling way too familiar to anyone who spent serious time diving. I checked my backups, forcing calm, feeling my heart pound like a punk drummer. Fortunately, the gauge stabilized, just enough to keep me from bolting topside like a frightened guppy. Sweeping my flashlight through the gloom, I caught a reflection off something metallic below. My pulse quickened. Could it be the galleon? My oxygen troubles momentarily forgotten, I descended further, ignoring that little voice inside me whispering I was swimming straight into trouble. Hey, Gold has a louder voice. But instead of a sunken ship, I found something else entirely. An opening on the ocean floor, hidden among jagged rocks, glowing softly with a weird greenish phosphorescence. Now, when your instincts tell you not to enter an ominously glowing hole in the ocean, you should probably listen. But if I were the kind of guy who listened to instincts, I'd be selling life insurance instead of diving into underwater caves. I hovered at the mouth of the tunnel, feeling drawn forward, curious and wary all at once. The glow brightened, pulsing gently, beckoning like a siren call. My head ached suddenly, a migraine flashing behind my eyes, accompanied by an odd sensation like static buzzing between my ears. But I shook it off, blaming nitrogen narcosis. Divers call it the martini effect, where you feel slightly drunk and reckless underwater. I'd never experienced it before, but it explained why chasing an alien green glow seemed like a perfectly sane idea at the time. With one last glance at my gear to confirm the oxygen was stable, I squeezed into the tunnel. It narrowed quickly, the rocky walls scraping against my tanks. Anxiety twisted my gut as darkness closed tighter around me, the only illumination coming from that damned glow ahead, urging me deeper. Halfway in, I felt movement. Water displacement from something massive passing just beyond the tunnel's entrance. I turned, eyes wide, expecting to see a shark, or maybe a whale. Nothing, just empty ocean. Yet something told me I wasn't alone out here, not by a long shot. Swallowing hard, ignoring the chill crawling down my spine, I turned back and kicked harder toward the glow, and straight into the biggest mistake of my life. When you're underwater, time feels slow and thick, like honey dripping through a sieve. Every breath through the regulator came with a mechanical hiss, reminding me how dependent I was on a tiny piece of gear. The tunnel tightened, then widened suddenly, spitting me out into something that didn't belong beneath the waves. A city. Not the kind of city you expect, with skyscrapers and Starbucks. This place was ancient, weird, and completely wrong. Architecture shaped from black stone, smooth and reflective, built by something that clearly wasn't human. The buildings loomed crookedly, clustered in haphazard formations, their angles dizzyingly impossible. Everything glowed with that eerie green light, illuminating the city like some twisted Vegas strip at the bottom of the ocean. Drifting forward, heart hammering against my ribs, I shone my flashlight onto the walls. Carvings covered nearly every surface, detailed murals depicting monstrous, fish-like creatures ruling over terrified human figures. I felt a nasty sinking feeling, pun definitely not intended, and wondered briefly why ancient civilizations never seemed to carve friendly dolphins or something cheerful like smiling turtles. No, they had to go straight to nightmare material. My mind raced. Could this place be Atlantis? Yeah, if Atlantis was designed by Salvador Dali after a 3-day bender. As I examined one carving, movement flickered at the edge of my vision. I swung around, flashlight trembling, catching sight of something darting behind a crumbling pillar. Just a fish, I tried to convince myself. But fish didn't usually look like pale humanoid shapes, gliding silently through the shadows. I turned slowly, trying to keep track of the forms slipping in and out of sight, my flashlight beam slicing through the gloom. Then one of them swam straight into the light, and my blood froze solid in my veins. It wasn't a fish. Hell, it wasn't even close. This thing had grayish-green scales, webbed claws, and large bulbous eyes that stared unblinking, utterly alien. Its mouth gaped open, revealing needle-sharp teeth like a deep-sea predator. It hovered perfectly still as though sizing me up for dinner, or worse. Just as my brain caught up with my eyes, the creature emitted a shrill clicking sound, almost mocking, definitely not friendly, and lunged toward me. I tried to swim backward, fumbling for my diving knife, but others surged out from behind the building, surrounding me in moments. Hands, cold and clammy, impossibly strong, grabbed my limbs and gear, dragging me down through the city streets. Panic surged in my chest as I struggled uselessly. They moved like shadows, swift and coordinated, clearly accustomed to hunting underwater prey far tougher than a confused diver from Massachusetts. For one bizarre second, as my flashlight spun away into darkness, I wished I'd stuck to finding rusty old ships. At least pirate ghosts were theoretically negotiable. The creatures hauled me toward the center of the city, toward a massive temple pulsing with that cursed green glow. As we entered, I caught sight of what awaited me inside, and any humor I had left quickly drowned under the tidal wave of pure, unfiltered terror. Being dragged into the glowing temple felt a little too much like being the catch of the day at some nightmare sushi bar. My pulse thudded furiously in my ears, every instinct screaming for escape, but the grip these creatures had on me was like steel. I tried twisting, kicking, even biting, but they held tight, unfazed. Probably amused, too. Underwater wrestling clearly wasn't my best sport. Inside the temple, things took a turn from bad to much, much worse. The architecture was dizzying, its black stone walls covered in intricate carvings, each more grotesque than the last. Images of creatures emerging from the depths, consuming sacrifices, and ruling an underwater kingdom spiraled around a massive altar. It reminded me of Sunday school Bible stories about Jonah and the whale. Only this whale looked like it ate Jonah, his friends, and half the town for dessert. The creatures bound my wrists to the stone altar with seaweed-like cords, tightening them until circulation slowed and my hands numbed. My regulator was roughly ripped from my mouth, and before I could even gasp, they fitted something else, a strange translucent membrane over my face. Panic spiked, then confusion, as the material flexed gently, allowing me to breathe freely underwater. My relief lasted about 3 seconds before reality crashed back. These fishmen were keeping me alive for a reason, and it wasn't charity. Then they started chanting. Low and guttural, their voices resonated oddly through the water rippling the temple walls. Greenish luminescence intensified, pulsing in sync with the chant. For a wild moment I considered joining in. Maybe if I pretended I knew the lyrics, they'd let me go. Stranger things have happened in Salem, but humor was thin armor against the sheer dread clawing at my gut. The chants rose sharply, reaching a frenzied crescendo until suddenly the entire temple seemed to shudder. My vision blurred briefly, nausea bubbling in my stomach, and a shadow moved somewhere beyond the altar. Something huge stirred from below. I strained against the bindings, twisting my head desperately to catch sight of whatever horror approached, and immediately regretted it. Dagon, that was the name whispered from the depths of my subconscious, rose from the abyss beneath the temple floor, enormous and godlike, his presence dwarfing everything around him. His eyes blazed like twin underwater suns, staring straight into mine, pinning me with a force that stripped away every layer of bravado I'd ever worn. Every rational part of me wanted to look away, but I couldn't. Not out of bravery or curiosity, but simply because his gaze held me as surely as chains. A deep vibration filled my skull, words forming without sound, clear and impossibly powerful. You have come seeking treasures of the drowned mortal. My throat tightened. Telepathic sea gods usually didn't offer friendly conversation starters, and this one seemed particularly irritated at being disturbed. but perhaps we share desires. Perhaps in you I have found what I seek. Before I could even form a question, like what a colossal fish god might possibly seek in a 30-year-old diver with student loan debt, Dagon leaned closer, those blazing eyes inches from mine. Your life has value, but everything has its price. I was raised to never trust anyone who offers a deal that's too good to be true, especially gigantic fish gods with glowing eyes at the bottom of the Atlantic Ocean. Yet there I was, trussed up like a Thanksgiving turkey, about to negotiate my survival with Dagon himself. Life's funny like that. His gaze drilled into me, stripping away all pretense. My bravado shriveled, leaving me feeling very small indeed. But desperation tends to spark courage, or stupidity depending on your viewpoint. And I decided to gamble. "What do you want?" I croaked through the membrane covering my mouth, surprised my voice carried clearly underwater. It figured cosmic horrors wouldn't settle for poor communication skills. Dagon paused, as if amused by my audacity. Then came his answer, a voice reverberating in the hollow of my skull, smooth and irresistible as the tides. "Return to your world, mortal, bearing my gifts. You shall spread my influence. Through you, others shall come to know me." "So you want me as your underwater PR guy?" The quip escaped before I could reconsider. Sarcasm, evidently, was my last weapon against eldritch dread. To my shock, a sensation of amusement radiated back. It was chilling, yet oddly humanizing. "Precisely, diver, I reward loyalty." With that, Dagon turned slightly, revealing a recess in the temple wall. My eyes widened, gold shimmered, treasure piled high, encrusted with gems that sparkled even through the murky waters. In front sat a statue, small enough to grasp easily, intricately carved and heavy with precious stones. Even underwater, greed found a way to quicken my heartbeat. Dagon sensed my fascination. "Take it, carry this idol. Accept the fortune, but remember, you owe me a debt." The cords binding my wrists suddenly loosened and fell away. Tentatively, I rubbed my numb hands, glancing warily at the assembled deep ones. They watched silently, reverently, though I couldn't tell if they envied me or pitied me for what I'd just signed up for. I swam forward cautiously, reaching out to take the idol. As soon as my fingers brushed its surface, a surge of energy jolted through my veins. It felt simultaneously exhilarating and terrifying, like injecting lightning directly into my bloodstream. The world spun momentarily, colors flaring impossibly bright, then stabilized again. I shook my head, gripping the idol tighter, savoring the weight. Treasure fever had nothing on whatever this feeling was. "Thank you," I murmured awkwardly toward Dagon. "What do you say to a primordial sea deity after striking an unholy pact? Pleasure doing business? Probably not." His eyes flared once more, piercing me to the core. "You will return. All those touched by the depths always do." A current tugged gently at my back, guiding me away from the altar and toward the temple entrance. Around me, the deep ones parted respectfully, watching silently as I swam free. As I left the temple behind, relief surged, but beneath it simmered a dark, lingering unease. I couldn't shake the feeling that even though I'd survived, the hardest part of this deal was still ahead of me. Breaking the surface was like emerging into another world. Air slammed into my lungs, fresh and real and impossibly clean compared to that watery tomb. I hauled myself onto the deck of my boat, clutching the idol so tightly you'd think my life depended on it, and maybe it did. The sea spat me out, coughing, choking like Jonah reconsidering his career choices after whale-induced trauma. Collapsing onto the deck, I laughed, a ragged, jittery sound edging close to madness. I'd just survived a meet and greet with an ancient ocean deity, and came away richer than I'd ever imagined. So why did I feel like I'd lost something more precious than gold? Night came swiftly, cloaking the ocean in velvet darkness. I barely remembered piloting the boat back to shore, operating on autopilot. My house felt strange, too quiet and too empty, like the familiar had suddenly turned hostile. Exhausted, I collapsed onto my bed, idol in hand, and drifted into sleep, naively assuming rest would bring relief. Instead, dreams devoured me, vivid, seductive nightmares pulling me down through endless oceans. Each dream led me back to that sunken city, the eerie green glow calling me like a homing beacon. I'd wake drenched in sweat, my pulse racing, the idol clutched so tightly my knuckles turned white. Sometimes I'd catch myself sleepwalking, headed straight toward the beach, barefoot and confused, chasing a whisper I couldn't quite hear when awake. Days passed. Friends noticed I'd changed, withdrawn, distracted, permanently damp-looking, like someone who'd just survived a discount cruise through hell. I laughed it off as diving sickness, joked about becoming part merman, and avoided their worried gazes. It was easier that way. But nothing eased the constant clawing urge to return beneath the waves. Normal life grew unbearable. The only thing that felt right was holding the idol, which now seemed heavier, warmer, more alive each day. And my wealth? It barely registered. How ironic. I'd struck gold and lost my sanity. Classic cautionary tale material. Then Mark called, my diving buddy, asking about our planned salvage expedition. Initially I hesitated, remembering vividly the temple, the creatures, Dagon's voice. But the idol pulsed warmly in my palm, promising me peace if only I obeyed. It's a once-in-a-lifetime chance, I told him, forcing cheer into my voice. Bring your camera. You won't believe what's down there. Found something good, huh? Mark laughed, unaware. Maybe I'll finally get that Pulitzer. Yeah, I murmured softly, dread twisting in my stomach even as I smiled. Something unforgettable. As I hung up, guilt briefly clawed at my conscience. But the idol's comforting warmth smothered it quickly. Rationalization came easily. What was one life compared to cosmic destiny? Besides, hadn't I warned Mark countless times about the dangers of diving? He knew the risks. I forced myself to believe it. Just as I forced myself to ignore the mirror's cruel reflection. Sunken eyes, pale skin, a stranger's face staring back. Dagon's promise echoed in my skull, drowning out every sane thought. You will return. I didn't need convincing. Soon, I'd be home again. Taking Mark back down to that nightmare city felt wrong in all the right ways. Like stealing candy from a kid if the candy was cursed and the kid had fins and gills. Mark was all enthusiasm, eyes bright behind his diving mask, eager to uncover what he thought was the archaeological find of the century. Poor guy had no clue he was just bait on a hook. We sank slowly into the depths, past the familiar jagged rocks, and through the mouth of the glowing tunnel. I kept glancing sideways at him, heart thudding hard enough to crack ribs. This better be good, Jake. Mark's voice buzzed through the headset. I skipped date night for this. It's killer, trust me, I said with forced ease. Dark humor was the only way I could stomach my own betrayal. Soon the tunnel spat us out again into that impossible underwater metropolis. The green glow immediately wrapped around us like a toxic embrace. Mark froze, his flashlight trembling slightly as it illuminated the twisted architecture and grotesque carvings. What the hell is this? His voice shook, fear creeping in. Welcome to the club, buddy. Atlantis' creepy cousin? I tried humor, but it fell flat even to me. Mark turned, eyes narrowed behind his mask. You knew exactly what this was, didn't you? Accusation and realization mixed bitterly in his voice. Before I could respond, shadows flickered, shapes emerged, and panic erased any chance for explanation. The deep ones surged forward, swift and merciless, surrounding Mark. I watched numbly as they dragged him, kicking and thrashing wildly toward the temple. His screams echoed in my earpiece, a sound I knew I'd carry forever. Yet I couldn't move, I didn't even try to save him. The idol burned pleasantly in my gear bag, satisfaction mixing perversely with the horror I felt. Mark vanished into the temple entrance. Moments later, silence swallowed his screams whole. The creatures glided around me, ignoring me completely. Clearly, I was VIP status now, the world's worst loyalty program paying out in blood. I stared after Mark, sickened yet strangely calm. My head buzzed softly with Dagon's approval, an addictive sensation that made my pulse quicken. Mark's sacrifice had temporarily lifted the weight pressing on my chest. I felt free again, almost human, almost. Back aboard the boat, I sat alone, staring at the empty seat Mark had occupied earlier. The radio crackled, Coast Guard chatter mentioned weather conditions, oblivious to the horror beneath the waves. I glanced at the idol, now gleaming maliciously beside me, as if congratulating me on a job well done. You're a monster, I told it weakly, realizing too late that I was talking to myself. The idol sat silent, its emerald eyes glinting mockingly. Maybe I was losing it, or maybe, just maybe, I'd already lost it the moment I touched that damn statue beneath the ocean. As the boat rocked gently under darkening skies, laughter bubbled up unexpectedly, dry and brittle, barely recognizable as mine. How many more divers would I feed to the abyss? How long could I justify the blood on my hands? The worst part, the part that scared me most, was realizing I didn't want an answer. I only wanted the call to quiet, if just for a while, whatever the price. After Mark vanished, my life shrank rapidly into something ugly and surreal. I became Salem's unofficial diving guru, infamous for leading wealthy thrill-seekers and gullible treasure hunters beneath the waves. Locals joked I was cursed. They weren't entirely wrong. In hindsight, I should have branded myself Jake Eldridge. Guided tours to certain doom would have made for snappy advertising. Every trip beneath the waves soothed the ache in my bones, silenced the buzzing in my skull. At first it bothered me a lot, luring innocent people to their deaths. But with every new victim the guilt numbed, becoming background noise drowned beneath Dagon's approval. Months passed. Then came the investigators, relentless men and women asking too many uncomfortable questions about missing divers. I deflected expertly, playing the concerned friend, claiming ignorance. I'd grown into a great liar, which worried me almost as much as how little it bothered me. One chilly afternoon, a journalist named Sarah Evans appeared on my dock, all persistence and ambition wrapped up in a neat package of trouble. She had suspicious eyes, quick and sharp, perfect for sniffing out monsters like yours truly. "You have quite a reputation, Mr. Eldridge," she began, sizing me up. "Several divers vanish, yet you always resurface unharmed." I shrugged, forcing a casual smile. "I'm just lucky, I guess. Call it Poseidon's blessing. Or Dagon's." Her reply froze the air between us. My forced grin faltered, just slightly, but enough for her to notice. She leaned closer, sensing blood. "I've read the local myths. Funny how they match your pattern so closely." "You read too much Lovecraft," I said weakly, trying for humor. "Horror stories rot your brain." "Maybe," she agreed evenly. "But people have died, and I intend to find out why." I should have walked away right then, cut my losses, moved to Nebraska, anywhere without a coastline. But my mind buzzed again, the idle, seductive whisper soothing my panic. "Bring her to me." 2 days later, Sarah joined me aboard the boat. She'd come armed with a waterproof camera and a lifetime of curiosity. Perfect bait. As we plunged beneath the surface, dread and excitement battled within me, a strange mix I'd grown disturbingly comfortable with. The sunken city greeted us as always, monstrous and beautiful, glowing gently with its toxic light. Sarah hesitated, awe quickly turning to unease. "My God, it's real," she whispered through her headset. "Reality's overrated," I muttered darkly, swimming slowly forward. "You wanted proof, here it is." She began photographing everything, carvings, buildings, the altar itself, until shapes stirred from the darkness. Her screams echoed, sharp and familiar. I watched passively as the deep ones claimed her camera spinning away uselessly into the gloom. Then I saw something new, on the temple wall, a carving that froze me in place. Clearly depicted among the monstrous forms was a human figure, transforming slowly into one of them. The idol clutched in his hand was unmistakable, as was the carved face. Mine. I recoiled violently, nausea churning in my gut, realization hitting with sickening force. I wasn't just serving Dagon. I was becoming one of his creatures. Horror clawed at my throat, strangling my breath, yet even as dread consumed me, the idol pulsed in my hand, soothing my panic. "Embrace your fate," it whispered silently. "Destiny awaits." You ever look in the mirror and not recognize the guy staring back? I'm not talking bedhead or a bad shave. I mean really not recognize him. That was me 3 weeks after I brought Sarah down. My skin had taken on a clammy, almost gray tone. My eyes, once a warm brown, were shifting toward green, too vibrant, too alien. I had told myself it was stress, deep-sea exposure, lack of sunlight, diver problems. But deep down I knew better. I was changing, not just physically. I'd stopped sleeping. My thoughts no longer felt fully my own. My dreams were no longer dreams. They were instructions. echoes of a voice older than humanity, whispering secrets in a language I never learned but somehow understood. "Eat more fish," it said once. I laughed. It wasn't funny. By now the disappearances had made the local news. Serial diver vanisher, they called me. Terrible nickname. I would have preferred something like the subaquatic stranger. Still, I kept my head down, let the attention fade, and refused to speak to anyone not wearing a wetsuit. That's when the police showed up. 2 officers, one local, one from out of town, posing as hobby divers. Thought they were clever. One even brought a GoPro. I played the part, smiling, helpful, even offered snacks. But Dagon's call was louder than my caution. And by then I was running out of time. We went down that same day. The waters were choppy, felt like the ocean was anticipating something. I led them through the tunnel, that now familiar green glow guiding us. I kept glancing at my hands. The webbing between my fingers was visible now, faint but real. They hadn't noticed yet. When we reached the city, one of the officers stopped short. I could see it in his eyes. He knew, maybe not everything, but enough. He reached for his belt, some kind of underwater flare. That's when the deep ones struck. They swarmed faster than I'd ever seen, full of fury and hunger. The first officer screamed into his mic as something pulled him backward and down into the black. The other tried to flee, but the city shifts when it wants to. He disappeared into a corridor that hadn't been there seconds earlier. And me, I didn't run. I couldn't. I knelt in front of the temple and waited. The water around me churned. From the deep below, Dagon rose, taller, more defined, his monstrous form framed in the temple's light. But this time he wasn't looking at me like a pawn. He looked at me like a successor. "You have served well. Now you shall become." I tried to scream, to swim away, but my body locked up, frozen in place. Pain blossomed across my limbs, radiating from the idol in my hand. My bones twisted, my chest heaved. I wasn't just changing. I was being remade. Above us, the blood of the fallen dispersed in the water like ink, and I finally understood I wasn't the messenger anymore. I was the message. If you've never felt your bones bend, your skin shift, and your thoughts tangle like seaweed in a riptide, count yourself lucky. I don't recommend it. The pain wasn't sharp. It was deep, ancient, as if my very DNA was screaming in protest while Dagon rewrote it like a mad author editing his most loyal character. I collapsed on the ocean floor, clawing at the sand, watching fingers that no longer looked like mine. Webbing stretched between them. My reflection in a broken slab of stone revealed gills flaring behind my jaw. My teeth, well, they weren't made for chewing steak anymore. And through it all, I felt good. That's the part that terrified me most. Dagon hovered above, watching with hollow approval. Around us, the deep ones circled, not like hunters this time, but like brothers welcoming me home. A sudden boom ruptured the quiet, followed by a shaft of light from above. My head snapped toward it. A dive team, spotlights cutting through the murk. Divers in sleek black suits, descending fast and armed, not tourists, not cops, government. Guess they finally noticed all those missing people. They moved with practiced precision, fanning out around the city, cameras rolling, weapons raised. One diver, a woman, motioned to the temple. They were coming straight for me. I rose, slowly, painfully, half human, half something else, and looked down at my hands. The idol was still there, fused to my palm like coral. It pulsed with sickly light. I didn't want to fight, but I knew they'd never leave here alive. Dagon would make sure of that. The deep ones shrieked and surged forward, striking like eels. Chaos exploded in bubbles and blood. Muffled screams filled the comms, and the water turned cloudy with red. I watched it all, numb and floating, until one of the divers aimed at me. Not out of hate, just fear. He fired. The harpoon tore through my side. I roared, louder than I thought possible, and something inside me snapped. Not from pain, from instinct. I lunged. It was fast, brutal. I didn't kill him. I didn't need to. Dagon was already swallowing the others, pulling them into his temple. Tentacles reached through doorways that weren't there moments ago. The city pulsed with energy. The walls shifted. This wasn't just a battle. This was a feeding, and I was helping. When it ended, the ocean was quiet again, just me, the ruins, and whatever was left of the team scattered like breadcrumbs. I floated there, staring at the bodies. I should have felt guilt, anger, remorse. Instead, I felt clarity. I was home. But part of me, the last sliver of Jake Eldridge, ached. Not for redemption, for memory, for the surface, for who I used to be. I turned to Dagon, who drifted closer. "You are complete." I nodded, feeling the truth of it. But before I could answer, a sound pierced the water, a sonar ping, distant but getting closer. Another team was coming, and this time I wouldn't let them leave. They came at dawn. I watched from the edge of the city as their submersible descended, bright lights cutting through the gloom like spotlights on a stage. More divers, this time armed with heavier gear, scientific instruments, and remote drones. Probably the cleanup crew for the team that didn't return. I wondered if they'd bring flowers. The part of me that was still Jake wanted to warn them, but the rest of me, the part born in the temple, baptized in blood and salt, was already planning who would go first. I didn't attack right away. No, I waited, floating just behind a column of stone, watching their leader give silent hand signals, efficient, tactical, professional, but still human, still prey. Then they reached the temple entrance. I moved without thinking, a blur in the water, my limbs now built for speed and silence. They didn't even see me coming. The first diver vanished in a cloud of red. The second managed to fire a harpoons, but it bounced harmlessly off my skin. The others panicked, wrong move. The deep ones swarmed, and I joined them, not as a pet or a priest this time, but as one of them. The slaughter was fast, efficient, terrifying. Afterward, I returned to the altar where my journey had begun. I stood beneath the green glow, holding the idol in my hand. It no longer pulsed. It didn't need to. Its work was done. I no longer dreamt of the surface. I belonged to the deep now. Sometimes, though, rarely, I think about the sun. I remember the feeling of warm sand beneath my feet, the taste of coffee, the sound of gulls. But those are fading now, like light vanishing through deepening water. Dagon gave me purpose, and in return I give him names, faces, sacrifices. I am no longer Jake Eldridge. I am the tide that calls to the greedy, the whisper in the bubbles, the hand that guides them downward. And if you ever dive near Salem, if you ever feel something watching you just beyond the reach of your light, turn back or don't. Either way, I'll be waiting.